Thank you so much for joining us today in another edition of Tech Tuesday. Today's discussion is the path to big tech, how tech professionals get to work with the biggest technology firms in the world. I am Luis Garcia, Vice President of Emerging Technologies at Full Sail University. And we have a great panel today of amazing leaders. We have Kourtni Marshall, software engineer at Google. And we have David Drips, engineer manager at Facebook. And we have Chris Kelley, a staff UX designer at Google as well. So I'm going to go ahead and thank you, welcome everyone. And I'm going to be calling your names. And if you can give us a brief introduction of who you are and what you do for our audience here, please. Go ahead, start with you, Kourtni.
Hey, how you doing? As Louis said, I'm Kourtni Marshall. I'm a software engineer at Google. I'm also a Full Sail graduate, was in the recording arts program. A little bit about my past is I actually started, as I said, in the recording arts program, I started in the music industry and over the years migrated over to the more technology side of things. I saw some issues in the music space that I thought could be solved with technology, and so I rededicated myself to trying to learn more about the technology space so that I can solve the problems that I saw in the music industry. Just related to technology and stuff like that, not personalities and stuff like that. But that's me.
Thank you so much, Kourtni. And Chris, will you please tell us who you are and what you do?
Of course. Hey, everybody. So my name is Chris Kelley, and I'm a 2002 graduate from digital media. I've been at Google for about 5 years, working as a UX designer, sort of multidisciplinary design. Before that, I spent a very long time in Los Angeles working in the advertising industry, actually doing a lot of motion graphics, 3D animation, but also some interactive development and things like that. And similar to Kourtni, I sort of, throughout my career, was always kind of attached to both of these pieces of me, doing the motion design and visual effects world, but I was always keeping a really close connection with programming and interactive development and things like that. And then, so about 5 years ago, we decided to move the family up to San Francisco and switch over into big tech, and it's been great. So I work on immersive computing at Google. I worked on sort of wearables research and development for a while, and then worked on a rapid prototyping team for augmented reality and virtual reality. And now I work on a product called Google Lens, which is a computer vision camera experience that we have.
Thank you so much, Chris. And David, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Cool. Hey guys, yeah, I'm David Drips. I graduated from the recording arts program in 2005, and then the entertainment business program, which I think is music business now, in 2006. Yeah, I always loved technology, so I was always like tinkering with computers and things, but music's been my passion my whole life. So I went to Full Sail for recording arts, really enjoyed it, went to the entertainment business program where I discovered like entrepreneurship, and I can share a little bit more about my journey from there. But yeah, then migrated out to Silicon Valley, worked for myself for a while, and then I've been at Facebook for just shy of 7 years now. And I worked on businesses at Facebook for a long time, helping businesses to be successful, advertising, selling products, and now I work on data delivery for mobile devices.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the introduction. We're going to go over a few questions first, and then after 30 minutes, we'll probably go to audience questions. All of you guys are watching, please feel free to send questions via the comments in Facebook, and the team will pass those along with us, and we'll start covering those in the second half of the session today. So let's get started. So my love for technology started very early in life, and I think I'm older than everyone here, so it's been a lot longer for me. And but I was about 8 years old when my parents asked me if we wanted a computer, and this is the 80s. We thought it was maybe like another video game. And our first computer was an Atari 400, and they had 16K of RAM. And when we bought the computer, and this is in Latin America, I'm from Venezuela, it came with a one week course of programming. And so we could actually do stuff with the computer. And so me and my brothers, we took this course in BASIC, and I've been behind the computer ever since. I really love the idea of typing stuff and things happen when I giving commands and getting a response back. So for you in the panel, what was that moment in which you fell in love with technology? I'll start with you, Kourtni.
Yeah, it's kind of a similar story, honestly. I'm from the south side of Chicago, and I am from a community where, at least definitely at that time when I was growing up, computers weren't really in everybody's houses or anything like that. But my father just thought it was an important thing. Like, hey, we need to have a computer in the house, even though he didn't know how to use it or anything like that. And it was there. And then, I was about 7 years old, I recall. And there was, this new thing in there, and it was like up to us to figure out like how to get some use out of it. There was like manuals, so you had to go read through a lot of stuff. There was no online world back then. And I remember that there was a program that was maybe like already in the computer called BASIC. And I started, reading the manual, like, if you type this up, a sprite will appear and it'll move across the screen. And I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. And so that was like really my first like real taste of me giving some kind of command to a computer and it doing what I tell it to do. And so I think that's probably like, some of the first inspiration. But I will also say that even later on, a bigger inspiration became as video gaming became like more commonplace in the households, and because we used to go to the arcades and all these things. That's also another big tie for me. Like I was just always mesmerized by like, oh wow, these video games, how do they make it? I want to learn these types of things, and that's some of my inspiration.
Oh, that's great. How about you, David? How did you when was the moment that you fell in love with technology?
Yeah, man, I feel like we all have a similar story. So my dad worked at a software company in the 90s. He was on the finance side, not technology, but we had computers since I was like a kid. I think I got my first computer when I was 9. I remember this because it was an 8086. Intel had just come out with the 86 processor. So it was like the very first of the 8086 generation. Yeah. And it had a button on the front for turbo mode, and it used a lot more power, but you could convert it from a 16 megahertz processor. And if you put turbo mode and we're willing to pay the power bill, you can get 32 megahertz of processing, which is, thousandths of what we have today. But yeah, so I remember you turn it on and it would just be DOS. It'd like C:\/ and a little, greater than sign. And you type win.exe to start Windows, which was just software. It didn't load with the computer. Or you could type, QBasic, because, quick basic, and you could get into like the developer experience of QBasic. And I didn't even know about it. But then I was at my school library, and just being a nerd, I was like in like the computer section, which was like 3 books, And one of the 3 books that we had in the library on computers was QBasic. Oh. And I actually, man, I don't know if we still have library cards. I haven't been to a library in a long time. We used to have these things in the back that you'd pull out, and then they'd punch the date on them. And like every time they'd like increment it when you checked it out, you got it for 1 week. And I filled up like the front and back of this card, because I would just check it out every week over and over for like a year, to the point where the school library actually just like gave me the book, because nobody else could get it, because I checked it out every week. And I just devoured that thing for probably like a year, and just, started making like little animations, like move the, letter A right, and it'd be like my character. But then so that's how I learned. And then in 1995, I remember the internet came. So I always had we had Telnet, I had like a 14.4 baud modem, and you could like renew your library books online, but it wasn't the World Wide Web. So the World Wide Web just came around in like 95. and like there was like graphics and text, and you could do this marquee where you could like make text scroll across the screen, which is like the only thing you could do. And that was it for me. Once the internet came, then I was like, oh my gosh, this is just like the coolest thing I've ever seen. So from like 1995 was like really when I just like dedicated all my free time to nerding out on the internet. Yeah.
Well, how about you, Chris? When did you fall in love with technology?
Yeah, at the risk of parroting the previous answers, similar story. Early in life, we had my father was a physician, but was very interested in sort of new technologies. We got an Apple IIe at the house, and
I like that one.
And that was sort of my first introduction to just computing in general. But obviously, I had no sense for how that would fit into life. It was sort of just this anomaly. It wasn't until I was probably in high school and sorry, I'm having connectivity issues. It wasn't until I was in high school and sort of starting to get exposure to graphics and video and starting to understand that you can actually stitch these things together sometimes, and it doesn't have to just be video recordings. You can stack other stuff on top of it. And then I think, to answer your question, when I really fell in love with it, I think it wasn't until, so all of these things were progressive exposure in my life. It was like the computer and then internet and understanding graphics and these different pieces. I think the first time that it really started to resonate with me was that, like, I remember the first time I was learning about JavaScript and it didn't really connect with me yet. And then I think when I started learning about Macromedia Director, was the first time that I was able to like abstract the principles. And it was like, oh, wait a minute, these aren't just things, like specific things that you can do. There's actually this fundamental abstract concept where you can like control machines, and you can create things and do things that don't exist in the world. And that was really when I first got that first sense of abstraction. It was really opened my mind to what was really possible, and then there was no looking back after that.
Man, all these stories bring back so many memories. So let's move on to making the decision to pursue a life in technology. And for me, it was very easy. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but I also, like many of you, I actually was a musician as well. And so my life always revolved around both things, being a musician and being a programmer. And by the time I had to decide to go to college, I was very much combining both, using technology to make music, and I even wrote software for music as well. And so it's very easy to pursue a career in technology after that. So how was your process to pursue a career in technology, and specifically if also has something to do with it, and then that as well? I'll start with you, Chris. And
yeah, so mine was maybe slightly messy, and it started out with, I grew up in a really small town in Iowa, like out on a farm, and where I went to high school, there was sort of like a predictive path for everybody. You went to the University of Iowa, or you went to some small school and played football. It was just kind of what you did. And that was the plan that I had. And I was like, I'll go to Iowa, and I don't know what I'm going to study, but that's what everybody else is doing. And then maybe 2 years before that, I had replied to an ad, which I later found out is the longest running ad in, I think, Rolling Stone magazine, a Full Sail ad. This is like back when you'd send a letter off and they'd send you a letter back, And so I had this little bug in the back of my head about this mythical place called Full Sail. And so, I'm getting to the end of my high school career, and I'm thinking, I'll just go to Iowa. But I wasn't like super excited. And my mom actually was like, you should go down to Full Sail and just look at it. You've been thinking about it for like 2 years, maybe just go down and see. And I convinced a buddy to drive down to Florida with me. And I saw it, and I came back, I walked in the room, and my mom said, "You're not going to Iowa anymore, are you?" I said, "No." And so, Full Sail was sort of this, for me, it was kind of like, it was the enabler I needed to chase the path that I felt in my heart, you know? It's gonna make me cry because it was a special thing.
It is. Oh my gosh. Wow. You know, not all the parents were that supportive for going to Full Sail, and
Yeah.
and you should be very, very proud. Kourtni, I saw that you went away. I came back, so I'm happy to see you back.
Yes.
How was your decision to pursue a career at Full Sail?
It's an interesting tale, I suppose. So originally, I first, this it's weird. Like the way that your life kind of moves is strange sometimes. So for me, actually, I went to University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and I in the computer science department started there. And for whatever reason, at this time, this is when they were like, the people. They were like at one point they were like the #1 school for computer science and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But the philosophy there, which hopefully has changed, it was like a weed out philosophy. Their philosophy, like, hey, well, we have these classes and we want you to go through them and make them really hard, and only the people who can make it through this gauntlet or whatever that we throw at you will be allowed to kind of really be in the that didn't really sit well with me, because my thought was I go to school and I want to be able to ask questions. I want to learn. I don't know all of these things, even though I was exposed to a computer at 7 and that type of stuff. I in my classes at school, we never had like a bunch of computer science and all that stuff in high school and grammar school. A lot of my colleagues, my peers, did in the program. And so I just, I felt like they weren't really trying to get the people who weren't already coming with the full, gamut of skills. They weren't trying to get us kind of like that. So actually, I changed my major to pre-med kinesiology at University of Illinois. And I was doing that. I was like, oh yeah, I'll be a doctor, blah, 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 whatever, right? Like I didn't really care about it as much because my passion was really the computer science. I just didn't like how they taught it. But also I'm into science, so I was doing well in the pre-med kinesiology. But, and I had in my mind, like the music thing was always on my mind as well. And I said, hey, you know what? I had created this long convoluted trail where I said I will, what I'm going to really do is I'll become a doctor, and then I have enough money to, buy the equipment to do the music stuff and all, it's like this long, I said, and then lo and behold, I went to a school that is nearby University of Illinois College, but they offered a program called like a recording studio program, and I just wanted to go in like, oh, let me see what this is about. Like it was a class. I took the class there, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then somebody maybe there kind of mentioned, oh, there's actually a school that does this all the time. And I looked into it, and Full Sail, like, wow, Full Sail. I said, well, why am I going this long, convoluted route to get into the music industry? Why don't I just go directly to Full Sail? And that's kind of like really how I did. I was like, you know what, let me stop this craziness and let me just go straight to the source and get the real skills I want directly.
Wow. You're already thinking as a programmer, you're creating an algorithm to get to the music industry.
I'm like, that was crazy.
All right, how about you, David? How was your process to pursue a career at Full Sail?
Yeah, I actually, somewhat similar to Kourtni, I started school at George Mason University for the computer science program. And I would say that lasted about 3 months. I was way more interested in like playing music for my bar tab or like at a house party than I was about going to class. So I eventually just like stopped going. I didn't like drop out. I just like stopped going. And like, I don't know if you guys like, do you have a high school guidance counselor? And they always ask you, like, you fill out these things like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you're like, oh, I really like numbers, so maybe you should be an accountant. Well, I really liked, music and house parties. So I decided I was going to be a rock star. And so like, turns out like you can't like go to school for that. But I was like, well, the closest thing I can do is like learn how to like record music, produce music, get my stuff out there. And I actually had a friend of mine who was going to Full Sail for the game design program. And he was like, hey, they have a music program there. Like they teach you everything you need to know to like record and produce music. Why don't you just like go do that and try to make a go at this thing? I was like, that sounds awesome. So yeah, we moved down at the same time. He was my roommate. He did game design. He later switched to film and graduated from the film program. Yeah, and then I did recording arts. And from there, yeah, like I said, I did the entertainment business bachelor's program. But that was like this huge pivot for me. And I can tell you more about that later. But that was it. I just really wanted to be a rock star. And the closest thing I could find that would like satiate my parents' need for me to go to college and at the same time put me on that track was recording arts at Full Sail.
You know, is when I first entered the workforce, I thought that being a musician and being a programmer was actually something rare, but it's not at all. Actually, it's actually very common to find musicians in technology. And here, like everybody here, are in the same path. All right, so if something actually is constant in technology, is change. Technology is constantly evolving, and things have changed a lot. And since I became involved with technology in the 80s or even through the 90s, when I went to Full Sail, I took a class in virtual reality, actually in 95. And nothing came to it. And virtual reality kind of was a fling and went away. And now it's back, you know, the last few years been really, really strong. And Full Sail is back at teaching virtual reality. But we see those examples a lot in technology. Can you talk about what have changed since you graduated from Full Sail and until today, and what has been the pace of change and how you adapted to it? And I'll start with you, Chris.
It's a great question. You know, I think it's there are specific trends that you can connect with that the pace of evolution is a little longer or slower, whether that's because of technological constraints, you mentioned virtual reality, or you know, the way society prepares for these things. You know, do people want this? And I think that probably the biggest wave that I would say that I've paid attention to over the last almost 20 years is just kind of the way people engage with technology. And it's less about the technology itself and like how do people engage with the experiences that we use the technology to provide. And, you know, obviously over time, if you think, you know, a long time ago, people probably would have thought it was, you know, bananas to have, you know, people would never watch video all day. It's way too slow and blah, blah, blah. And humans think very linearly, right? Like we're wired to think linearly, and it's very hard for us to think exponentially, to think, hey, if a few pieces of enabling technology fell into place, what could happen? It's very hard for people to project that. So I don't, you know, in hindsight's always 20/20, and I can look back and identify sort of like things that have changed. But I would say the biggest wave that I try to internalize is people's relationship with their technology. Like, do people want things that engage them? Do people want to interact with things? Do people want to be part of the story? Do people want computers to get out of the way and just sort of like be superpowers? I think, you know, that piece of what people want from technology is that's the thing that I pay attention to. And I think it's the pattern I see is people probably wanting technology to help more and get a little more out of the way.
Yeah. I imagine that makes you really good at your job as an experienced designer. And can tell you got to think of those terms. So Kourtni, you know, how much has technology changed since you started?
Well, it's real interesting. You know, once again, I started in the music industry out of Full Sail, but I think there are similar changes to what happened with music. But I think it's all based off of technology. So I'll say this: the biggest change that I see in regards to technology, and I think it's more of a overarching thing, is the democratization of everything. Like, it used to be a lot more gatekeepers to things, and when I came out of Full Sail, if you wanted, I went to work at the Hit Factory, if you were anybody trying to make music, you had to go to big studios, and somebody like me would like record your music and mix it and all of these types of things. But that costs a lot of money. And so there was a gate for the average person, like, well, I'll never be able to do this. Technology has empowered so many people to now create, a masterpiece in their bedroom, right? And so that's the biggest change. And the same thing has really happened with like even computer science and like learning how to create programs. Like, it used to be, oh, I need to go to MIT, University, these big schools or whatever to learn anything. But now everything is online, and I can go online and watch the same seminars that they give at MIT or whatever. And now I can write my own programs at home. And so I think that's the biggest change is that it's in everybody's hands now. And I think it's like the most beautiful change too.
That's awesome. How about you, David? You've been in technology for a long time as well. So how much technology have changed?
Yeah, I mean, how much? Like night and day. It's pretty drastic change. Yeah, like I said, what got me excited about just technology and computer science in general was the internet. And I think the biggest shift that we've seen. So I'll date myself, but I graduated in 2006. So in the 14 years that I've been out of Full Sail, I think the biggest change is in connectedness. Like, the internet changed everything, and then mobile computing. And I mean, like, your mobile phone and your tablets and stuff, but also just like nobody has a desktop anymore. Everybody uses a laptop. I'm on a laptop right now, and I just carry it in my backpack. And that was just like not feasible. To Chris's point about like technology solving problems but getting out of the way, I think that whether or not that's true, we're so connected to especially our mobile phones, that we don't even realize how much we're interacting with technology on a day-to-day basis. And so I think that's been the biggest shift, is just like mobile computing. The thing that I see now with the current state of the world and how much remote work and things are going on is, to your point, Luis, the virtual reality. So I work at Facebook, and we own Oculus, which is a huge VR thing. Player. What does that shift look like? Online education with schools not potentially going back. Do we have the catalyst now where VR, which again has been tried and failed in the industry 3 or 4 times in just the 15 or so years I've been in the industry, is this the catalyst that actually takes us over the top? So that we're not only mobilely computing and remote, but we can feel more connected at the same time. And that would be a really cool, shift again in the technology. And I'm hoping that this is actually what gets us there.
That's great. So we're getting to almost half of the session, and I'm gonna ask one more question, and we have a few questions that audience has already started to send. So it's really exciting. But I wanted to ask you about challenges, particular challenges, and I have a very silly story, and bear with me. And when I was in my first job, this is early days of e-commerce of the 90s, and you date yourself for graduating in 05. I graduated in 96, and so we spent 6 months creating this storefront for a merchant for a vendor that sold merchandise of the Green Bay Packers, and the contract, don't ask me why, say specifically that the store was to become available when the Packers won the Super Bowl. And that year they had classified to the Super Bowl. The year before they went and they won. This year they're back in the Super Bowl. And 2 days before the Super Bowl, we lost all the data, all of it. And so within that night, we had to recover 6 months of work. And we didn't sleep that night, and we had support from all over the world, and we were using an Oracle database back then, and it took a lot of ingenuity to bring back everything in one night that we have been doing for for 6 months, and we were very, very proud when we finally went to bed at some point, and to wake up to the fact that the Green Bay Packers did not win the Super Bowl, and therefore we couldn't put the website online. And so can you think of a tremendous technology innovation or challenge that you overcame that you're very proud of? And I remind you that you cannot give us any trade secrets unless you choose to. I'll start with Kourtni. I'm sorry.
Well, that's a hard one. I'm trying to think of, I can't really think of any like huge, I mean, that, like your story or, I mean, obviously there's day-to-day challenges, like, just dealing with technology, trying to create things brings its own challenges. I'll give an example of a typical, or not a typical, but one of the projects I worked on. And I think one of the things that gave me I felt gratification about doing it was that I helped solve an issue for the company, right? And so I work at Google. My role is a software engineer in what's called core engineering, which is kind of like the people who make programs for actual Googlers or to save the company money or things of that nature. So they're like internally focused.
So it's not customer facing.
They're not right. These aren't customer facing things that we're trying to solve. The problems that we're trying to solve are like the problems that the company has. And so we had some issues at Google that dealt with scaling requests. I'll put it like this. So the problem was that the company was rapidly growing. I mean, when I joined Google in 2012, so 8 years ago, to now, there is like 5 times as many people as when I joined, which is insane. So the company had the way that a lot of issues were solved were like through tickets, right? You create tickets and then a human being would look at it and XYZ. So as the company scaled, you need more and more people to put eyeballs on the ticket and do these things. So they're like, hey, this is not gonna work well. We need to figure out a solution for this particular problem, which happened to be recording meetings, what we're doing now, which is, it's funny. But back in the day, to record a meeting, people had to file a ticket and say, hey, I want this meeting recorded. What I create, so they're like, hey, this is a big problem. It's not growing with the company. What I did was I created a system that automated the process so that people, there wouldn't be a long turnaround for when people made a request to when they wanted to actually have the meeting, and it just like became a very smooth, flawless thing in the entire.
Oh no! Did it for you too? Oh no! Oh, this is getting to the climax of the story. Let's give him a few more seconds. Maybe he comes back. Yes.
Back. I don't know where you lost me at, but I guess I was just saying that me wasn't scaled. The solutions that exist.
Oh no. Okay. Kourtni, I don't know if you can hear me, but you've been cutting, and now you're out. And we'll bring him back. David, can you tell a story of the big technological challenge that you guys overcame or you overcame?
Sure. Yeah, let me provide a little bit of context on what I do a little bit more, because it'll help illustrate why this is such a challenge. So about 10 years ago, Facebook invented a technology called GraphQL. And what it is, it's just a really efficient way to declare what data you need to render your app and just get that amount of data. And the goal here, and compare and contrast that to like the old way of doing data delivery, which is you would make a request for, let's say, the profile view in an app, and then the server would send you back just all the data that you needed to render the profile. Well, what happens over time is like the app, you have different versions of the app. And the data that you need to render a view changes over time. But if you have everything in one request, then you have to send down the data for all the different versions of the app. It becomes like really, really difficult, and you wind up overfetching a lot of data. So what GraphQL as technology does is allows the data that you fetch for your app to evolve with the app. So you only request the amount of data you need to render the view. And that's important. So I support the GraphQL teams at Facebook. And we are responsible for making sure that we only send the minimum amount of data to the app that's necessary. And you might think that's like over optimizing, but our team serves like over 1 trillion requests a day. And so if you can just save like 0.001% of the processing time on any request, that translates to millions of dollars for the company over time.
Right.
And that's what my team does. Over the last, say, 3 months, this is all public. You can listen to Facebook's earnings reports. Our user growth is off the charts. People aren't going to work. They're sitting at home. And what do? They get on Facebook. And, messenger chats, like all these types of things are really growing. The problem is, at the same time, truck drivers and logistics companies that we normally use to ship us new servers into our data centers, those companies aren't working. Like they're there. So we are serving over 3 billion people a month now. And like I said, just trillions of requests. And we have to do that on the exact same hardware that we had 2 or 3 months ago. And this poses like a huge problem to just like keep the site running. And my team is responsible for making sure that happens. So the last couple months have been, 1, a lot of firefighting, but 2 is really evolving the way that we build technology to handle cases like this. And we've seen it like the Super Bowl, we get huge spikes. New Year's for about like 3 hours from, Eastern time to Pacific time, just massive spikes that we are way outsized outliers in our data delivery. And so we've had to, and normally we would just like anticipate this and then we'd get through it and then we would go on with our lives until the next big event. But as Facebook grows internationally, more of these international events are affecting our traffic. And then the coronavirus pandemic has just taken off.
Wow.
As a result, we're having to change our thinking for how we do data delivery, and not just like, okay, we'll just like spin up more servers and serve this data. It's like, cool, we have to really think about what happens at these spikes. How do we automate alerting so we're aware that these things are happening, but 2, that our systems are responsive to this type of stuff so that we can automatically handle this traffic and figure out like the right trade-off between the expense that we incur and the capacity that we have versus like the quality of the user experience. So how much do we prefetch? How much do we send down? How much do we compress this? Because that affects battery life on the device. There's a lot of these sort of trade-offs that we're having to make. And it's been cool because we're now applying like machine learning and automation to how we do data delivery and taking into account all these different factors that would affect the user to try to serve the exact minimum amount of data that we have to allow them to have the best experience possible. And we're still in the middle of it, but I can say like the difference in the way we develop our technology has changed drastically just in the last few months. And we're continuing to optimize this. And I think over time, we're going to be able to like save a lot of dollars for the company, which is great, but also just like the amount of power that we use to serve Facebook will decrease, which is good for the environment and all these other like third order effects that are also important to the company when we're thinking about how we develop products. So it's been really challenging, but also pretty rewarding over the last few months.
That's pretty amazing story. Thank you for sharing that. It reminds me when the iPhone was introduced and AT&T just could not keep up with the data delivery portions of it. They said they would needed to rewire the whole country, and that was going to take years. And then people started thinking like your team is thinking, okay, we could probably solve this with software. And they basically created capacity within the same cables and by using software to accommodate the iPhone. But before I go to Chris, we actually missed the last piece of your talk, Kourtni, when you were saying the impact that, and you were getting so animated, I think that internet couldn't take it. And and so if you could very quickly before we go to Chris and we'll start taking questions from the audience, explain to us what was the final outcome of the project.
Right. So the impact basically was that the solution that I came up with automated the entire process of from recording to delivery of the recording, so that it's scaled with the entire company, and that it became just the thing that everybody used by default, and it wasn't a hard process anymore. And people it just became that the entire company was using it, and life kind of moved on beyond that like stumbling block. This was like 6 years ago, and today everybody's using it. And the reality is actually that some of that same work that I did is now part of Google Meet, which is a competitor to Zoom and all of these things. So that was the end result, was that we were able to scale all these requests that the company was getting without having to hire 500 people just to manage certain types of requests we're getting.
Another innovative solution for scale with technology, right? Like the one that David just described us. Chris, how about you? And can you think of a very innovative work that you were involved?
Yeah, I think you mentioned any specific sort of like project story. I might say something more about for me, what was more of like a mindset shift that has had really big impact.
Okay.
Which, spending 12 or 13 years in the creative agency world, it was always about like what we thought was cool or what the client thought was cool. And as long as those boxes were checked, the project was correct, right? And as I shifted industries and moved into, putting technology in people's hands, not only that part changes a lot, right? There's this like classic adage for UX designers, it's like, you are not your user, right? Like just because you like something doesn't mean that it's right for the user. It doesn't mean they're going to understand it just because you understand it. This is actually a thing that we deal with a lot where Kourtni and I work, because, we live in big metropolitan cities with people on great phones with good connections. And it's very easy for us to gloss over experiences that might not work for everybody. And so when you combine that with something like augmented reality or virtual reality, where I often tell people like something might, when you talk about it, it might sound great. And if you do like static design mocks of it, it might look really good. And then you're like, yeah, that's going to work. And then you prototype it and you find out that it doesn't work at all because there's some feeling, there's like this intangible thing with immersive computing that you just have to feel it to really understand if it's going to work or not. And when you combine that with the sort of you are not your user thing, the mind shift that I've sort of had to really come to terms with over the last several years has been this, I actually can almost never rely on myself to be right. I have to rely on users, and I have to rely on the experience itself. And that my job is sort of that, I'm like an archiver of findings and learnings, and I'm an advocate for what users are experiencing. But just coming up with what I think is cool on my brand new device, on my, nice connection, is not going to be representative of the people who are using the experiences that I'm building. And so that shift of like what was kind of creativity for creativity's sake to creativity to provide a great experience for someone has been one of the big mindset shifts that I've had over the last several years that has really helped me a lot.
Well, this is a perfect segue for the first audience question, and you just gave me a thought that is really incredible. Like it's gotta sound so obvious, but I never really thought about it. But in order to be an effective UX designer, you gotta be humble. Otherwise, I mean, you can't be think that you know it all, because then you're gonna lose your job very quickly, because the user at the end is gonna decide what they like and what they don't.
That's right.
But I did have a question here. I'll start with you, Chris. And how important are the soft skills versus the hard skills in the tech industry? And that's a question from our audience.
That's a good question. I'll answer the hard skills one first, which is that it's really important to know the first principles and the foundational principles of your discipline. So, like programmers, like how does general logic work, and how do you want to architect and structure systems, right? For design, it's like, what are some of the fundamental interaction design mechanics that we can rely on? Which ones do we know work? Which ones don't work? knowing those is important, but the tools you actually create to execute them don't really matter. It's sort of team dependent. So like, should I learn Illustrator or Sketch or Figma or any of these, dozens of apps that come up all the time? It doesn't really matter. Should I learn Cinema or Maya? I mean, obviously, if you're a specialist and everybody does their character rigging in Maya, maybe that matters. But ultimately, I would say the important thing for hard skills is to learn the first principles, and then don't get too attached to your tools because they're going to change. Framer is going to change everything they're doing, or Figma is going to take over. Nobody uses Sketch anymore. It's like you have to be able to be flexible with that. For soft skills, there's actually a couple of different categories I would say for soft skills. One is sort of like what I would refer to as like political soft skills, right? Like how can you influence your organization to make sure that you can get to the vision that you have? Because especially in large companies, you can't just decide. That's not really how it works, right? You have to get buy-in, and there are stakeholders, and you have to create influence and sort of help create a narrative for people to understand, like, what is the impact of this proposal that you have, or these changes that you want to make, right? Or this experience you want to build. And so that ability to create narrative and to sort of like influence the direction of an organization is like super critical. Another category of soft skills, and a lot of that comes from, one is experience of just like getting reps, right? If you think about like an improv comic, like you don't just like show up to your first improv and you're really good. You just have to do it and do it and do it. And sometimes you bomb and sometimes it goes well, and you have to learn how to sense people and understand like what's important to you and how does what I want play into that, right? The other set of soft skills is just like working with people day to day. And that's obviously very critical for the scale and the scope of the problems that we're solving at larger companies. You very rarely can you do anything on your own. And so you have to be able to work with other people. You have to, be a good teammate and provide and help and not drag your feet, and, be able to communicate. Why do you want something, right? Why does it matter? Don't just say because I like it. So anyway, that's what I would say. They're both very important, but hard skills are kind of like, whatever, just learn the principles. That's actually the easy part. The harder part is creating influence and making sure that you can get buy-in and communicate with your teammates.
Okay. Kourtni, do you want to add to that answer? How important are the soft skills versus the hard skills in the tech industry?
Yeah, I very much agree with Chris. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, you have to have the hard skills even to like, be in the door, like just even like be in the interview, right? To get the job, you have to have the hard skills, right? But you really, a lot of times people don't recognize that you also do have to have some soft skills to get in the door too, right? And then your soft skills are going to be the things that accentuate and augment all your hard skills and make you that much more productive in everything you do. So, one thing, I tell a lot of people, I coach folks on interviewing and these types of things. People don't really understand that when you go into an interview, the people that are interviewing you, it's great if you get the problem correct, but a lot of times they're kind of like checking out how you go about a problem and how you communicate with them and that type of stuff. So they are doing an assessment of your soft skills, and I think people don't recognize that enough. So like when you even go into interview and talk to a prospective company or team that you want to join, it's important to be engaging, to tell them why you're doing the certain things that you're doing, why you're going about a process in the way that you're going about it. Don't just, put everything in your mind, compartmentalize that, and like think that that's going to be good enough. People want to know that you can communicate with them and that they can work with you to understand what's going on in your mind.
Chris, you said you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to plus one on what Kourtni said and say that one important distinction is that soft skills does not mean being extroverted. So I think a lot of people think, oh, I have to be like really good with people and I have to be like all bubbly and maybe this thing that you're not, right? And that's not actually what soft skills mean. Soft skills is like the ability to communicate, and that's okay if you're more quiet or if you listen more than you talk. Like that's actually a good thing sometimes. And what soft skill really means is trying to be able to understand the others around you, understand what's important to them, and then try to like work that into what you're doing, because it doesn't mean like trying to be a salesperson and just convince everybody of your thing. That's not what I do. I can't do that. I'm very introverted. I spend most of my meetings sitting there listening, but it's about taking all perspectives into account and approaching the problems like that.
Right. David, do you want to add to this question? Do you want to give you another answer? Because go ahead.
I have a slightly different opinion.
Oh, bring it on.
I agree with everything that was said. If you're like a staff level software engineer at a company, for this audience though, you're not going to join Google as a staff software engineer, right? Like that's a very senior position. You're going to need a lot of experience, right? For where this audience is in your career. So I'm an engineering manager. Like most of what I do is actual like career and people growth, less than the technology side now. Focus on the hard skills, right? Be a really, really good software engineer and get in the door. Because again, when you're a staff software engineer, absolutely, the soft skills are table stakes. But as a more junior engineer coming in, which is what you should focus on, just go get a job. Don't worry about your level. Don't worry about your headphones falling out. Just like go get a job. Everybody else that you're talking with is going to be highly technical as well, right? You're not going to be responsible for interfacing with designers and PMs and things like that. So focus on the technical side. As you grow and as you mature in your career, those soft skills become incredibly important because the network of people that to Chris's point, you're going to have to influence, I call it impact through influence, is going to grow, as will the disciplines that you have to influence. So like I said, design, PM, or in product world, very, very common partners for you. So to start off, focus on the hard skills. Understand your algorithms, your data structures. What's the big O notation of an algorithm? Like just the very basic things that you need to do to understand and develop good software. When you go get a job, you're going to be forced to develop these soft skills if you want to grow. And I would encourage you to do that and focus on that. But when I think there's an old adage, like as you become more senior, like the soft skills become more important. And I think that applies here. Just focus on the hard skills first, and through experience and your personal desire, like none of this happens by accident, right? You'll develop those skills, and one day you could probably be a staff engineer as well.
I think Kourtni did say you have to have the hard skills, or you won't get in the door. And so the message here is that you still have to know what you're doing, but you can't just be that. And I have a question from Gabrielle for Chris, but I'll open it to everyone if you want to answer it. Is what skills do you think you learn at Full Sail that are most beneficial to your current job at Google? And the question was directed at Chris, but I'll open up to the rest if you want.
Thanks for the question, Gabrielle. I think I'd say probably two things, and one of them is this bias to create at Full Sail. You know, Full Sail is like there's places that teach by reading books, and there's places that teach by just talking the whole time. And you know, obviously you get both of those things at Full Sail as well, but the bias towards making things and being creative and like using those skills to do things, like that is the way that it, at least for me, that was the way for me that it like really, I started to understand and resonate that like, hey, I'll learn way more if I just do stuff. And I carry that with me through my work all the time. Like instead of just talking about stuff, it's like, let's go over to the whiteboard and draw it out, right? Or instead of just like staring at mocks, like, can we prototype it? Let's prototype it. Because if we can just make, we learn a lot faster for me. And then the other thing I would say is like, I found at Full Sail that if I surrounded myself with equally passionate people, there's like never underestimate the power of a small group of passionate people. Like when I was at Full Sail, I had like basically unlimited access to resources because I was obsessed and I wouldn't leave people alone, and I would find people that were excited about it just like I was. And at Google, you know, Google is historically sort of like what we call like a bottoms up company, right? Good ideas can come from anywhere. And if you can find a group of people that are passionate about an idea, like literally the sky is the limit, right? You know, classically, Gmail came from somebody's 20% project because he
Right.
thought it was silly. We were a search company. He couldn't search his email. So like, yeah, just find people that are passionate and make things, and that has a lot of impact anywhere in life.
So, do you guys want to add anything to that? We have more questions, and we're getting to the end. I can move on then. But I love everyone to answer this one. And the question is from Marcus. What up-and-coming technologies do you think will make some waves in the tech industry in the future? I'll start with you, David.
Oh, Marcus, that's a good question. I think that there's two things that, like I said earlier, I think VR, especially in the world of like remote work and remote meetings, is going to be really, really important. To that end, I think that as we've seen even today, like internet speeds and connectivity issues need to be solved, right? And we have like 5G networks or 5GE networks, so not really 5G yet, evolving, right? And that's one good step, but like I think just the ever increasing capacity of both our devices, our mobile devices have CPU computing power, and then the speed at which they can connect is going to be a game changer. That's an ongoing evolution. It's not really a step function change that you're going to see. More on the step function side, I think that, so at Facebook, like most of our user growth is not in the US. It's coming from like the rest of the world. And along with connectivity issues, what I think that they're going to benefit from most is more like distributed computing. And I don't mean that in just like the traditional model of, hey, you have a bunch of servers that are all over the world, but things like blockchain, which has kind of fallen out of vogue now, is still really important in countries where you can't trust your government or you can't trust the banks, and things like that are still going to be really, really important. And then distributed access to information. The internet's a good start here, but things like VPNs for privacy as we're doing more remote work, and it allows you to bypass some of the restrictions that other countries place on your ability to get information, and make just the flow of information a little bit more free. In the US, we don't really experience this very much, but in the rest of the world, I still think that's, if you want like social impact to like change the world, helping people continue to get access to information and get it quickly is still just a real problem that we haven't solved outside of the developed markets.
Well, thank you so much. Kourtni, is there any particular, what technologies are you really excited for the future?
So there's a couple things that I think I think definitely what David was mentioning is this is still currently important right now. Machine learning, AI, those things are going to be kind of like wrap your head around, and they're going to make a lot of your life's change. But I think one thing that's kind of like further out, and I'm a little more excited about, because I think it's going to be a more drastic change, is quantum, and what that will do if it ever really takes off is it will make those intractable problems that currently exist manageable and doable. So there's a lot of things that we just really can't do because but quantum computing can, like, make something that takes 1 million years, you can do it in an hour or something. So, I think that is like further off, but that's the thing I'm like super excited about.
Quantum computing, for sure, something really, really interesting and exciting for the future. Chris, any technologies that you're very excited about the future?
I would plus one with what David said. I think the access to technology is probably a big one. If you think about access to the bleeding edge as like, kind of like a graph or a curve, right? You have this certain percentage of the global population who has access to all of this really cool stuff. We're here on the Zoom call, and then we can all talk to each other on Facebook, and obviously many people have access to Facebook because Facebook also cares deeply about developing markets. But it is the access to information and the relationship with technology is so different for people in other parts of the world, in developing countries, that I think getting those parts of the world the access that they sort of need and deserve, and that is going to have a bigger impact on humanity probably than well, I hate making tech predictions. Who knows? That'll be a really impactful thing. I wouldn't say that it'll have more impact than any one technology because you never know. But I think getting people more access is probably one of the best things that we can do.
So just wrapping up, it's one more question that I want to ask that it was asked in our last session. I thought it was very important. And because we have focused a lot about the great things about technology and how they impact our lives in a very positive way. But there are also a lot of challenges that are incredibly frustrating in technology and in our day-to-day lives. And sometimes they're unsurmountable challenges, like what you said, the things that for more that we want to solve them, it's really hard that you can solve them. And that traces down to the day-to-day sometimes. So how do you keep yourself motivated when you hit those very hard walls? And I'll start with, I see you're very excited, Chris, there, so I'm gonna start with you.
So, I mean, it sounds a little trite, but so I refill my creative tank by not doing anything creative. Well, not doing anything explicitly creative. And so I just spend time with my kids, spend time with my wife, get outside. The more I can sort of reconnect with the things that I value most in the world, I find that it's kind of like when you go to sleep and your mind writes all your memories and sort of your body repairs itself and your muscles get sore and all these things happen. The same kind of is true for me with kind of creative replenishment, that if I just like let my creative side go to sleep and instead focus on the things that I value most in my heart, then my creative side sort of like repairs itself and I come back very renewed and refreshed.
Oh, that's awesome. How about you, Kourtni? How you keep yourself motivated when you hit those very difficult problems that seems that are difficult to solve?
Okay, could you repeat that? You kind of broke up on me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. And how do you keep yourself motivated when you face those very hard problems that seems that are very difficult to solve?
You know, the funny thing is, like, I think those are the things that drive me. Like, solving the easy thing is not that, interesting, I suppose. And so when I'm faced with something that seems hard, I think that is the motivation for me itself. Just like trying something that I can overcome. And usually what that entails is that, it changes me. Like, in order for me to, to climb that hill, get over it, I have to change myself somehow, whether that's learning new technology, whether that's like, understand a problem in a different way. And so I think I look at problems as opportunities to grow. And that's why, that's how I motivate myself.
That's awesome. David, how do you keep yourself motivated?
That's a great question. Yeah, I'll say like so I joined Facebook in 2013. And at that point, Facebook was like the darling of the industry, right? They could do no wrong and we're connecting the world and everything's great. And then over the years, that cycle has, I think right now, like sentiment is like very, very positive on like the ability to connect people while we're working remotely. Over time, though, that sort of ebbs and flows depending on, decisions that are made in the news cycle and things like that. And every single time I have a lot of what Kourtni said of just like, that's the thing that like motivates me. Kourtni also mentioned like AI and machine learning and stuff, and like how do we deal with bias in machine learning? Like that's like a really hot topic right now because I don't know the answer. Like, but like if we all come together as a community, maybe we can solve these types of problems. So outside of getting that motivation, I think the other thing is being on the inside of the technology industry helps you understand that technology isn't this thing that kind of lives and breathes on its own. It's a group of people coming together and like putting code down, and like the technology didn't learn how to do things itself. Somebody wrote that code. And for me, having been on the inside, I think I have a much more measured approach to it. Because I'm like, okay, these are people doing things for the right reasons that maybe like have unforeseen results. And how we evolve, again, being the manager, like on the people side, how we evolve our thinking and how we develop people and how we train them to do a good job is like super motivating to me. And unless we can kind of see the cracks forming, well, we'll kind of keep doing things the same way. And I think that would like stunt our growth as people and as engineers. So I actually get excited about not only solving the technical challenges, but helping people grow and like change the way that we think about developing technology to account for this going forward. Because I think, Luis, you started with it, is like the only constant in technology is change,
Yeah.
right? And that's the exciting part.
That's great. I'm gonna have my last question, and I'm gonna tell you a couple questions that I've seen, and put them all together in one big question. But because people sometimes feel very intimidated about technology and about a career in technology, especially people in companies like yours that where you work that are famous for hiring the smartest people in the world, and some people feel intimidated by that, thinking that perhaps they're not that and they won't be able to succeed. So, what would you say somebody considering a career in technology, and given where you are, which is, remind everyone, you work for the biggest and best technology companies that hire the smartest people in the world, and how would you say somebody that is considering a career in technology? What would you tell them about that? I'll start with you, David.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I mean, you got like, if you think of like Facebook and Google and these big companies as like winning the technology game, like you got to be in it to win it, right? So I always tell people the same thing, like go get a job. There's no amount of like book learning and stuff. To kind of what Chris was talking about earlier, I feel like the computer science as an industry really evolved. Like it wasn't cool. Now it's like cool to be in computer science. But when I started, we were like nerds in our parents' basements, right? Like it was not like the cool thing to do. And we got there by just tinkering with stuff, just like going and trying things. And the only way you're going to get enough reps in, to use sort of Chris's terminology, is to do it professionally. Because unless you're spending 40 hours a week on it for years, like you're just not going to get enough reps to get there. So go get a job in the industry doing the job. And then I think you can apply to Facebook every 6 months or something. Just apply every 6 months. And if you don't get in, just like apply again 6 months later. You'll learn the system, like you'll learn how to do it. And you'll get in. But even for me, like my story, I don't have a computer science degree. So for me, like imposter syndrome, still to this day, right? And I've been doing this for a long time. So yeah, I actually went and like started my own companies and just like got a ton of experience till one day, like I had enough skills that they were marketable to a company like Facebook. Yeah, so I think anybody can do it. Again, myself, like, you know, recording arts and EBBS Full Sail, like we didn't have like the emerging technologies stuff at Full Sail when I was there. I probably would have done that. We didn't have that. So, you know what, I went out, I got a job, I started doing it. And then over time, like the opportunities presented itself because I was just loving every minute of it.
Kourtni, what would you say somebody is considering technology feels intimidated by, you know, the thought that everyone in technology is super smart and these companies that you work for are impossible to get into? What would you tell that person?
Well, you know, I would say that, you know, I think David gave a good answer in terms of, you know, you may have your eyes set on Facebook, Google, but just get a job anywhere and keep applying. You know, so that's like, you know, I think but what I would really tell people is that the people who work at Google and Facebook are just people. You know, we're all regular human beings. Everybody I won't say everybody at the company, but large percentage of people at these companies do have imposter syndrome, regardless of what degrees they have or how long they've been doing things. What happens is that, you know, sometimes the mystique becomes bigger than the reality. And the reality is just that, hey, I'm a human being and my colleagues are all humans. What you can do, though, is you can just, as David was talking about earlier and how I mentioned, like, get a good grasp of the basics, like have that knocked out. Like if you are like 100% confident that you can solve X algorithm, you know, X problem using a particular algorithm, and you know why you're doing that type of stuff, you know, like the speed that this should take, you know, the big O of this process, like getting that type of stuff down pat is like the key to the door. Like once you get in, you know, you still have to maintain and do more things, but getting a lot solid understanding of your craft, as Chris mentioned earlier as well, is the first step. And I think once you have that, you also get more confidence Like, oh, okay, wait, oh no, I know how to do this thing. I practiced this enough times, which goes to David's conversation about, getting that muscle memory. Just keep doing it, and you're gonna understand why you're doing X, Y, Z, and it'll all just click. Believe me.
That's great. Thank you. I'm gonna say that when I've been visiting a lot of you guys around, and I'll get back to you, Chris, and I didn't know what to expect. And even having worked in technology for so long, when I went to those places, like, these people are all geniuses. I gotta make sure that I know what I'm talking about. And as you guys said, it's just people, and people that are very focused now. But they're just people, just like you and I. Chris, what would you say to somebody that feels intimidated about going into technology and pursuing a career in technology, thinking that that's only for smart people?
I would say, like, don't ever gatekeep yourself, right? Like, don't be the one that says that you can't do something. Like, you also shouldn't pay too much attention to other people who say you can't do something, right? Unless those people are giving you really good constructive feedback on where you can focus. But like, the last thing you ever want to do is gatekeep yourself. So don't say I can't do that, or, oh, I'm not qualified to do this. It's like, who are you to decide that, right? Like, you're not the one making those decisions. Control the things that you can control, and the things that you can control are like hyper focus. Like, you have to be super focused on the things that you're interested in, that you're passionate about. Obsess over it. Learn everything that you can. Surround yourself with people who are also obsessed with it. Those are the ways that you're going to build those skills. The other thing I would say is, like, it's messy, right? Like, don't set this vision in your head, like, oh, I'm going to graduate from this place and then I'm going to go get a job at this place. Because then if that doesn't happen like that, you can very easily, like, get discouraged, right? And there's always, like, going to be disappointment. I've had lots of disappointments in my career, okay? And the thing to remember is, like, you just can't stop. Don't stop. Just because the path is different than what you had in your head, don't stop. Keep going. Do great work wherever you land. And the more you can build on that, the more experience you can build, put your work out there into the world. There's an investor in Silicon Valley named Jessica Livingston, and she has a great quote that's like, work with the garage door open. Like, people say, like, oh, these garage startups, and they got this. She's like, no, open the garage door. Like, show people what you're doing, show what you're passionate about, get your work out of there into the world. So it's not just what you're doing. Like, let's say you go get a job somewhere. It's not just what you're doing 9 to 5, right? It's making sure that you are letting the world know that you are interested and focused on this thing, and then let other people decide whether or not you're let them reach out to you. It becomes instead of a push model, it becomes a pull model, right? Instead of you trying to, like, send resume, like, you should do that too, right? But I'm saying over time, it's you become less reliant on making sure that you have these, like, moments of connection with people, and instead it's like, well, no, I've been connecting with people for the last several years, and I've built up a good portfolio of work here, and, like, all those things add up over time. And like I said, the path can be messy and circuitous. I know mine was, and you just can't stop. You just have to keep pushing for it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. This is getting now to the end of our conversation. I want to thank Chris, Davey, and Kourtni really for sharing our experiences with us. Thank you so much. I'm Luis Garcia, and I'll see you very, very soon.